Welcome to our last of our seminar on presentation techniques. We're going to talk about more professional presentation techniques, either for classroom teaching or for conference presentations or for public speaking in general. And so we're going to talk about your presentation media or multimedia, if you're using that. We'll talk about delivery methods, and then we'll talk about things like using your voice and your body language and things like that. So we'll start with multimedia, and particularly PowerPoint. That's the most common sort of multimedia. So can you think of examples of poor PowerPoint use? We might have talked about this a little bit before, but what are examples of bad ways of using PowerPoint? Maybe talk to each other for a minute. Think of poor ways of using PowerPoint or poor ways of using whiteboard or other media. What are examples of poor PowerPoint use or poor use of other media? It could be this sort of thing, it could be PowerPoint, it could be other presentation media. So talk to each other for 1 minute. So who would like to share some bad things that you have seen in bad PowerPoint use or other bad use of media? Don't be shy. Who would like to share something? How about over here?
There's a lot of letters in the presentation slide. And the presenter speaks very fast.
Okay.
Also very low voice. It follows that the students and the audience don't even understand what they are saying, what he's saying.
Okay. And I think that's kind of like what some people, I heard some of you talking and saying that people put a lot of information in their PowerPoints, and that's a related issue. So people put too much information, too much text or graphic information into their PowerPoints, and then sometimes they talk really fast because they've got a lot of information to cover. And this comes from a basic misunderstanding of what PowerPoint is. It was never designed as a medium to convey a lot of information. It is a very limited medium. It is a presentation aid, an aid, not the primary medium. It is a presentation aid, an audio-visual aid or support to support what you are saying or what you're lecturing about. It was never designed as a medium to convey a lot of information, and it can't convey a lot of information. If you try to use it to convey a lot of information, a lot of graphics, it doesn't work. And one reason, of course, is visual. The other reason is, as a speaker, sometimes you feel like you have to get through all of this information, and you talk fast, you don't interact with the slides properly or with the audience, and maybe you speak in a monotone voice, kind of like, like that. A monotone voice because you're talking fast, because you're trying to cover a lot of information, and you're not really conveying information appropriately with the PowerPoint. What are some other things? Pardon? Okay, so just reading aloud your slides, multimedia and technology, delivery, audience interaction. So notice what I'm doing? It's easy to fall into a monotone voice when I do this, because I'm not looking at you, and I'm not looking at you, I've got my back or my shoulder to you, and so that immediately ruins the audience interaction. A good speaker, whether it's a classroom teacher or a conference presenter or any public speaker, knows how to make eye contact with the audience and to move the eyes around the audience and maintain eye contact with the audience or interaction with the audience. And if you're teaching, you also want to be asking them questions and doing other things, not just talking. And it's hard when you have, either because you have too much text on your PowerPoint or you just don't know how to interact with the audience while you've got a PowerPoint. And by the way, I'm not using PowerPoint here. I'll show you. I'm using something else today. And if I'm not referring to the PowerPoint, I can come and stand between the screen and you, and I can talk to you. If I'm referring to the media, then I can stand to the side, and I can look quickly here, but then turn back to you. I can see what my talking points are, and then turn back to you. So this is really more of an outline medium for me to see what my talking points are. It's not my primary means of information. If I'm lecturing, my notes are my primary source of information, or my memory. If I don't talk about this, remind me at the end, there's a memory technique I'll explain to you that helps, at least for special presentations, for really important things. Okay, anything else?
Using font sizes and then colors that are not visible.
Yes, and we're going to see some examples in a minute, but particularly font sizes. So again, it's not good for a lot of text. So maybe, roughly maybe 6 lines of text per slide, not too much. And if you go more than that, the text gets too small and people in the back cannot see it, especially in a large lecture room. The text needs to be big enough and clear enough that everyone can see it. And if you have a lot of text, full sentences, if I put a whole paragraph here, can you read it very well? No, because that's not what it was designed for. If you have a lot of information, put it on a handout or send them a file or a PDF or something else, but not a PowerPoint. If it's a lot of text explanation, a lot of detail, use something else. But this. Okay, I've shown this to you before. It's a famous picture. Actually, you can easily Google it. Just Google the phrase death by PowerPoint or PowerPoint poisoning, and you'll get this picture on Google. What causes this?
The audience have lost interest, they cannot focus, they are tired,
Okay.
not interested.
They're tired, they're not interested.
With the speaker want to kill him.
They're not, especially in business meetings and business presentations, they want to kill the speaker, because those especially have a bad reputation for abusing PowerPoint. Business meetings are quite notorious. Here the audience has lost interest in the speaker, and probably the speaker has failed to maintain the audience's interest. Another thing is, this may be in a dark room, and one thing I don't like about PowerPoints is many times you have to turn the lights down and you get this sort of boring movie theater effect. And so I don't usually use PowerPoint. I'm not using PowerPoint today. In fact, I'm using Prezi, and I'll explain Prezi. If I do use PowerPoint, it's only on special occasions. If I do use PowerPoint, I use a black background with white text, so I don't need to turn out the lights. And sometimes that works pretty nicely. Depends on the room somewhat. But for example, what I find if I present in a big auditorium, it works for me if I use a black background in large white text. It's easy to see, it's high contrast, and I don't need to turn down the lights so much. Here's some other examples. So if you're using multimedia like PowerPoint, you got to think about the visual field and some of these other things, which I'll talk about in a minute. Visual field. So you've got basically the visual field. The human eyes and the brain work like this. We kind of put more attention on what's at the top. And this goes back to, our ancestors. When you look out at the scene, and in 10,000 years ago or such, you need to see if an animal is coming at you to attack you, or there's an animal that you want to attack and kill for your dinner. And so the top of the visual field is most important, and so the more important stuff is at the top, like titles, and less important information down below. So if there's a lot of minor information, it's hard to process all of that information down here. I'll also talk about spatial contiguity. That's how you put things together, and coherence and contrast, how things kind of go together. I'll show you some examples. Here's a typical bad slide. Hard to read, right? Why is this hard to read?
Contrast.
The color contrast, for one thing. the color contrast is wrong. And also too much text. There's too much text. Complete sentences. If you have a lot of complete sentences, it's too much for the audience to read. And then if there's too much text, like I said, you're going to stand here, plasma glucose levels reach higher levels after eating and older than higher. You're going to be like that. You're going to read from the slides when you have too much text. More outline style text, simple phrases, not long sentences or complete sentences. PowerPoint is not designed for that. Now back to the color contrast. That's important. White on blue doesn't work here. Unless you're in a room with a lot of red lights, perhaps. I don't know. What kind of color contrast work? Black on white, or white on black, or something like that. Or a very light color on a very dark color, or a very dark color on a very light color. Now if you do the opposite, if I do white on black background, I probably have to make the letters even a little bit bigger than usual because we're not used to reading white text on black background. So I do make the text even bigger than normal. Otherwise, black or very dark on white or something close to that. I've also seen some professors use white on a dark red or orange red background. Particularly I find medical professors like to use dark red, kind of blood red. I guess it tends to work. You might have to make the text a bit bigger and make sure that the color contrast is enough that you can easily see it, especially in the back of the room. And here I have light blue at the top. You can't really read light blue on dark blue. No contrast. Here you go. Bright colors don't work. And again, a lot of text. You can't read it. Or light colors like this. Some people like to highlight text with bright colors. If you're going to do that, make sure you still have a high color contrast. If I'm using a white background, maybe a dark red, but maybe a little darker than this might be better. But these colors don't work. Pink, kind of light purple, yellow definitely not. If you use bright colors to highlight text, keep a color contrast and don't use too much bright colors or don't use too much text highlighting. If you want to highlight text like this, use it conservatively because if you highlight too much, there's really no point in highlighting anything. If you just highlight 50% of your text, there's no point in that. So use highlighting conservatively. Things like this. Can you see this? No. Complex graphics don't go with PowerPoint. PowerPoint was not designed for this kind of graphic. If you need a complex graphic, the only case where this might be okay is if your students have this same graph in their book or in their textbook or CD-ROM, or if you give them a hard copy also, or just give them a hard copy, but don't put this PowerPoint junk. This is what we call PowerPoint junk. If you use graphics, make sure they're related to what you're talking about. Don't put graphics that are just cute, like this. One time I saw a medical professor giving a presentation and she had these cute animated graphics that had nothing to do with her talk. They were just distracting. So graphics are definitely good, simple graphics. It helps people to remember what you're talking about. It's helpful if you have text and maybe some graphics that are directly related to the text or to what you're talking about. It helps people to remember what you talked about, but they should be relevant graphics, not silly like this. Sound effects, probably not. Transition effects between one slide and the next, are those good for academic presentations? When your slide dissolves into the next one? Probably not. If you're teaching grade school, maybe okay. But for an academic presentation, it's kind of childish and it's distracting because your focus should be on your content. not your visual effects. You're trying to convince people that your ideas are interesting, or you're trying to convey information about your topic. You're not trying to impress them with your animation techniques, unless you're applying for a job at Disney or Pixar. Here you go. Some people do information like this. One, this is too small, of course. You can't read the text. And also the labels are down here, and they're referring to things up there. And so you have to go back and forth. This is called split attention. Your attention has to go back between here and here. This is somewhat better. Now the text is still a little too small, perhaps, but this is better because the labels are next to what they refer to. If you use graphics, have your labels next to your graphics. So this is kind of what we call spatial contiguity, togetherness. They're touching each other, or they're together, or coherence. Coherence means the stuff is together where it should be. The labels are next to what they refer to, not down here. What else? And of course this, again, too much text, and also there are misspellings and mistakes in here too. But you wouldn't know because you can't read that anyway. If you're back there, you cannot read that because it's way too small, it's too much text. How about this one? Is this a good slide and a good use of PowerPoint by this? Is the speaker interacting with the PowerPoint well? What's wrong here? Bullet, 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 bullet. So many bullet points. There's really no coherence. It's not organized. It's just a lot of bullets, a lot of bullet points. Bam, 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 like that. There's no coherence, there's no organization. It's better to organize things better, maybe at least outline style. Break this up into separate slides. Also the color contrast, as we mentioned, is bad. And he's standing right in front of the slide. If you're referring to your slide, go to the side, move around, and then if I talk directly to the audience, I'll come here and I'll talk to you, and I'll even stand between you and the slide, as I mentioned. I'll move around the stage a little bit and such, because I want you to pay attention to me, because you're the presenter, not this. You're the teacher, not the PowerPoint. That's what I always say. And so you should be in command clearly of your whole lecture, not the PowerPoint. And that's why I take control from the PowerPoint, and I talk to people. I move around. I break away from the PowerPoint. If I use PowerPoint, I'm not using it all the time. I'm using it for part of my lecture. More of the time, I'm talking to people. So those are things that kind of break your focus, your tension that we saw earlier, the text, the lack of coherence. Input channels. So during a presentation, if you're using presentation media, you're talking to people. They're getting information through their ears, auditory channel. They're also getting information from your medium. So what you have on the slide should be consistent with what you're saying. And that's why you don't want, graphics that are irrelevant or distracting. But that's also why you don't want to read aloud from your slide. If you're getting the exact same information through your ears, auditory, and through your eyes, what you're seeing, it's boring. Like when the speaker is simply reading the slide. Your brain is getting the same information, exact same information, through two channels, visual, auditory, and that's boring. If they're completely different, it's confusing. If what you're saying is not related to what's on here, then it's confusing unless I break away and I grab your attention by directly talking to you. So what you have on the slide should complement what you're saying. The primary thing. What's on the slide is simply to support and illustrate or help people follow what you're saying. Supporting graphics, outline, keywords, definitions, stuff that supports what you're saying, that helps the audience to follow what you're saying. But what you're saying as a speaker is the primary thing that they should focus on. You should be the focus of attention, not the PowerPoint for most of the lecture.
PowerPoint mistakes. Number one,
Okay.
People tend to put every word.
So,
There's some things I hate about PowerPoint, and I figure it's kind of my duty to point them out. So here we go. Here's common PowerPoint mistakes. Number one, people tend to put every word they are going to say on their PowerPoint slides. Although this eliminates the need to memorize your talk, ultimately this makes your slides crowded, wordy, and boring. You will lose your audience's attention before you even reach the bottom of your first line. Please don't do that anymore, please. Number two, most common, many people do not run spell check. Big mistake. Nothing makes you stupider than spelling errors. If it's got a red line under it, recheck the spelling. And finally, I hate this. Avoid excessive bullet pointing, only bullet key points. Too many bullet points, and your key messages will not stand out. In fact, the term bullet point comes from people firing guns at annoying presenters. Hence the bullet point. Bad color schemes, not good. Clashing background and font colors can lead to distraction, confusion, headache, nausea, vomiting, and loss of bladder control. I can't stay on that one too long. Here's something I've noticed. The number of PowerPoint slides you have in your talk, the less useful your talk actually is. Unfortunately, my presentation is right there. I've also noticed this. People love to pack data into their presentations. They shove more and more data thinking it's better, but it's not. The more data you have, the harder it is to read your slide, and the effectiveness plummets. Now you can improve the effectiveness by adding some shading and some 3D effects, and then some second order and third order effects, and then, I know, let's add some labels. That'll help a lot. And that's pretty much every marketing slide I've ever seen right there. Then some like VP of marketing standing there going, it's real clear in Q4. What the hell are you talking about? Now I'm into in animation. People become animators in PowerPoint. You can have things flying all over the place, and that can be good. If you're a visual learner, that will improve the effectiveness of your performance. But if you're easily distracted, more animations and people have no idea what you're talking about. They're just, wow, that is cool, wow. And there's regions here, by the way. There's the simple but effective region. There's the active but confusing, the effective but boring, the active but ineffective, the dull but static region, the busy but useless, the ADD only region, the useful but amusing, the stupid but confusing, the dull triangle, the hyper triangle, the sleepy square, the dizzying pentagon, and everything else I just call pointless motion. That slide right there took me an hour and a half to make, right there. PowerPoint.
All right, so turn the lights on, thanks. So that is a good summary of the abuses of PowerPoint. You can find that on YouTube. And the last thing he said, he talked about the time it takes to create these things. That's another reason I don't like PowerPoint. It takes so much time to prepare these slides. And that's why I don't use visual presentation media very much, because of the time it takes. For me, it's more efficient to prepare paper handouts or PDF handouts for students. Now, in some fields, it's different. Biomedical fields, for example, some science fields, you do have a lot of visual stuff to present. There are other things you can do. You can make handouts available to present graphics. There are things to do when you use graphics. If you have complex graphics, put them on a handout, break them up into several slides. Any graphic should, especially if it's important, it should be big enough for people to see. If it's a graphic or a table that's presenting important information, it should be big enough to see. If it's a data table, leave out unimportant data or lines or numbers and only include the most important things. Make the full graph available somewhere else. Like for data tables, you can also highlight kind of a slight highlighting of alternating lines or important lines so they can see which numbers are really the important things. And those are some other things to think about. Alternatives to PowerPoint. Now there are free versions like LibreOffice, the Google Docs, Google Drive has a presentation medium. Those can create kind of simple presentation files for free. Do any of you use LaTeX? Any of you in science, engineering, math use LaTeX? If you are in engineering, math, or chemistry and you use LaTeX for creating your documents, LaTeX also has document classes for creating slide styles. They're basically PDFs, but in a slide style, which is kind of cool. That's only if you already know LaTeX for science people. So if you already know LaTeX, you can use LaTeX to create slides. They're basically PDF. It's a PDF in a slide size page. And it's really cool because I can, in LaTeX, you can create slides with a navigation bar on the side, a navigation bar or an outline, and people can see where in the talk you are, and you can click on these and go back and forth. That's only for science people who use LaTeX. Prezi, I'm using Prezi. Have you heard of Prezi? Prezi is a web-based program, and I'll show you a little bit in a minute. Or you can use handouts or whiteboard. Same cautions apply for whiteboards if you're using, I love whiteboards, that's what I mainly use. Your whiteboards should not be messy, it should be big enough. You shouldn't stand with your back to the audience all the time. You could, write and look at them sometimes. Sometimes it's good to put things on PowerPoint so you can maintain eye contact with the audience. Whiteboards are also kind of more interactive in a sense. I can write things freely and talk to you. Your text should be big enough. It should be organized well so that people can read it. It shouldn't be messy and all over the place, like you go from here and here and here. I like to, if I'm teaching in class, this one is a little unnatural because of this position, but if I'm using a regular whiteboard, I kind of go down one column, I kind of divide it into columns, I kind of go down here and then down here. I use it neatly and nicely so it's easy to read and easy to take notes. But I don't want my students to spend too much time taking notes because it kind of distracts from paying attention to the lecture or the discussions or their questions and the interaction. So more often I do provide handouts with information so I don't have to write too much on the board and I don't need to use PowerPoint. There's SmartDraw, I mentioned here, for creating graphics. SmartDraw, GIMP is kind of like a free alternative version to Photoshop. It's free. It's a little harder to use, but it's completely free. And it works, there's GIMP for Windows, Macintosh, and Linux. And since I'm a Linux user, I like that. Inkscape is kind of a simple vector graphics program. SmartDraw is a little expensive, but it can create graphics like flowcharts and mind maps, which you can then embed or export to PowerPoint or PDF or to graphics files. It's a little expensive though, like $300, I think. If you use LaTeX, there are websites where you can do this. You can type in an equation in LaTeX code and get a graphic. This generates a graphic. That's the code. And it creates a graphic like this. And you can then put this graphic into your PowerPoint or into your document. I think that's how they create formulas in Wikipedia pages. Again, that's if you already know LaTeX. Also, OpenOffice, LibreOffice have a LaTeX equation editor where you can either use the drop-down menu in OpenOffice, LibreOffice, or you can use LaTeX code. It understands LaTeX code for creating formulas in equations. This is for you science people. If you're a humanities person, probably Prezi. I like Prezi sometimes. It's free. It works mainly through a browser. There's a free version that works through any browser, although you do need an internet connection. There is a downloadable version which you pay for. I think it's about $70. The free version is just browser-based. It can import from PowerPoint, you can export to PDF, although it's a little clunky. But what I'm using now is Prezi. And the design interface sort of looks like this. It's basically a big canvas, and I'm just zooming from one thing to another. And I have these, I can kind of determine the path lines or the order in which things appear. So I'm just zooming in from different parts of the canvas. And that's what you're seeing. This presentation here is Prezi, and I'm just moving around a big canvas. I'm just going from one part of the canvas, moving to another part. So it's kind of cool. So PowerPoint is kind of very sequential. Prezi is kind of non-linear, and it works nicely for some non-linear things. For example, if I'm using PowerPoint, I've got kind of like the main points of my talk. I present, like I did at the beginning, the main points of my talk, which are multimedia, delivery, body language and stuff. I can kind of come back to that easily in Prezi. So when I finish one part, I can come back to my outline. If you're using PowerPoint, it helps to repeat that outline slide. I finish one section, I repeat my outline slide. Okay, we've talked about A, and now we're going to move on to B. That helps people to follow your talk. And it's easy to do that in Prezi. So Prezi has an interface kind of like this. It's changed a little bit since this time, but basically you can organize your slides, so to speak, and you can have some basic draw functions and different themes and formats. It's fairly easy to learn. You go to prezi.com, sign up with your university email account, because then they give the educational version, which is a little nicer, has a few more features and such. It's not as easy to navigate from a keyboard as PowerPoint. I can't really use this remote clicker like I can with a PowerPoint, having to use a keyboard or mouse. That's kind of the older Prezi interface. They've changed that. And you can have these path lines that kind of determine the order in which things will appear. Now I'll show you what I can do with Prezi that I can't do with PowerPoint. I can zoom in on a graphic, on a complex graphic. Can't do that with PowerPoint. Here's another example. You can zoom in more. It's kind of cool. Now with Prezi, some cautions. It is cool. It's cooler than PowerPoint. But when you transition, when you go from one sort of slide to the other, you can kind of change the angle, and people sometimes abuse that. And it creates these sort of spin effects. So you don't want to do these kind of spin effects in Prezi, where you're doing like this, like that, and you end up like feeling like that. So you don't want to abuse that. I've seen people abuse that in Prezi. There's a few other things. These are not really relevant directly to presentations, but for teaching purposes, I like to use Dropbox and Google Drive. I create some materials for my teaching. I'm working on them at my office computer, my home computer, and they may be on the classroom computer. I want to show them. So Dropbox and Google can be convenient for that. On a classroom computer, I could log into my Gmail, go to the Google Documents, and pull up a document for classroom use, or use Dropbox for managing my contents. I work on it at my office computer. I get home, the file is there on my home computer. Dropbox is a wonderful file synchronization program. If you don't have it, I'll put a link on my website. You get 2 gigabytes free. If you sign up with a referral from somebody, you and your friend both get some extra memory, like half a gigabyte. So that's what Dropbox looks like. If I'm at a classroom computer, I can log into my Dropbox account and I can grab a file from there. And that's Google. Okay, so here I'm back at my outline slide. It's easy to do this in Prezi. So, talk about delivery. Let's see, flow. Sometimes the flow of your presentation might be hindered by what kinds of things interrupt the flow of a presentation. If you're giving a presentation or you're listening to somebody give a presentation, what else can interfere with the flow of the presentation?
Errors on the slide.
Okay, things like errors on the slide, you get distracted, oops, made a mistake there. Things like that. The nervousness, if the speaker is nervous. I'll talk about that in a minute. Also, if you are trying to memorize your talk. I see some speakers do that. They try to memorize the talk, especially if you're not used to speaking English. Is that a good idea to try to memorize your talk? No. Why is that? Your brain then is multitasking. Your brain is trying to focus on the content, but then also the language. And so during your talk, you don't want to do that. You don't want to try to speak from a memorized script or from memory. It's better if you have at least notes, paper notes in front of you. Then you also have something to do with your hand, because a lot of speakers don't know what to do with their hands when they're talking. So notes or something like that. Or if you're too worried about your English and you're thinking about your English during your presentation, don't do that. Again, that will cause your mind to be distracted and you'll make more mistakes. What you do is rehearsal. Rehearsal beforehand. You rehearse beforehand and work on your English. Rehearse your English beforehand. During your actual talk, the contents. So you can do multiple rehearsals. Rehearse one time on the contents. Rehearse another time on the flow and organization. Putting transitional expressions in. Rehearse another time on your English pronunciation, vocabulary. Rehearse another time your English grammar and vocabulary. Rehearse your contents again. During the actual talk, just think about the contents. Now sometimes there have been important talks where it's really important for me to have good flow. I have a strict time limit. It's a very important talk, conference presentation, or special public speaking event. I really need to have the structure. I don't want to speak from a memorized script that will cause me to make mistakes, but I need a good idea of the structure. So I can use memory tricks. There's some old memory tricks, and this is not in your handout. For example, one time I gave a talk about how Koreans should go about improving their English skills. And so for this talk, I memorized key points. So for example, I talked about what are the challenges of you as a Korean learning English and mastering English. What are misconceptions that Korean learners have about English? It's important to know your misconceptions. And I talked about motivation issues, and I'll explain my hand language in a minute because this is my memory trick. Motivation problems and how to have proper motivation. Then about changing your strategies and goals in learning English and some practical strategies based on that. I'm using the physical space as my memory trick. Before the talk, I created kind of memory images for different parts of my talk. So over there, I created these even before I went into the room, and I go into the room, I have a few minutes to actually kind of cement these memory associations, these images, into the different parts of the room. So over there, the first part of my talk was the challenges. So I imagine over there something that's going to, in that corner, I imagine something to remind me of challenges, something interesting, strange, bizarre. I imagine a weightlifter kind of trying to lift weights. That reminds me of challenges. So I picture in that corner a weightlifter, something that reminds me of the first point of my outline. Second part, misconceptions. Misconception, myth. I imagine a statue of a mythical Roman or Greek god, or something like a classical Western statue of some deity. Reminds me of myth, mythology, misconception. And then I have other things over there in that corner to remind me of the different subpoints. Myth number 1, myth number 2, myth number 3. Then down here in the center aisle I had motivation. So I created different mental images that remind me of different things about motivation that I talked about. Then goals was over there, so I imagine like a soccer or football player kicking a goal. And then strategies, I imagine something that reminds me of strategies, and then some of the particular points about strategies I talked about. This is kind of an old memory trick. And there are variations on this that go back to ancient Rome. Ancient Roman speakers. So if it's an important talk, I use these. All I need to do is look at the room. I look over there and I know where I am in my talk. I look over there and the different images I have created in my mind over there. And so I keep my flow. I look over there and I remember where I am. I remember what I'm talking about. I remember the next point that I'm coming to. And for important talks, this has really helped me. This is good to practice this. Really strange, active, bizarre images. Something that will help you to remember that. And I create them beforehand, and then I go into the room and I kind of plant them in that corner, in that corner. And then I rehearse a little bit, and I do my talk from memory. It looks like I'm talking from memory. I'm not. I'm just memorizing the main points and the subpoints. The 4 main points, and maybe the 3 subpoints over there and the 4 subpoints over there. I've memorized kind of a complex outline. I've memorized a detailed outline. And that's how I did that talk. And I've done it basically similar talk several times, and I've used the same mental images that I still have, even though I did this, I created these a 1.5 years ago, I still have these mental images. I can still remember the main points of that talk, which I've kind of done several times. Efficacy is your sense of ability. Am I going to do a good job at teaching? Can I teach well? That's another thing to develop as a speaker. That comes from learning from practice, getting experience, and also learning from good speakers, especially if you have good teachers or professors yourselves. And I mentioned TED.com, that's a good place to, and also OCW, that's OpenCourseWare. You can find free online lectures, that's all. TED.com has really good speakers you can learn from. You can learn from their speaking methods, their speaking techniques. I mentioned nervousness here. Is nervousness a bad thing? Is it a bad sign if you're nervous before a talk, before a lecture? Not necessarily. Now, if you're extremely nervous, that might be bad. If you're extremely nervous so that you just can't talk, you just freeze up, that kind of extreme nervousness, that means you're probably too focused on your performance and what people think of you, which is not really healthy. And you probably need some small practice, maybe with a small group of people, and get some practice in a safe environment and then build up. But extreme nervousness means you're probably too worried about what people think of you, and you need to break free of that, maybe through practice in safe environments. But most people are nervous to a normal degree. But a lot of people misunderstand nervousness. If you're nervous, does that mean you're going to do poorly? No, but that's what people think. They think, I'm nervous, that means I'm not going to do well. Does it mean you're not prepared enough? Not necessarily. People think, I'm nervous, maybe I'm not really prepared. Probably not. Perhaps it can mean that, but more often people misunderstand nervousness. Is it a bad thing? No. It's actually a good thing. It is a natural psychological response to an important or stressful situation. You need extra energy for something that's really demanding, like your job interview or your first conference presentation, your job talk or something. You need a lot of extra energy. So nervousness is just your brain's natural psychological and physical response to an important situation. Your brain basically creates a lot of extra nervous energy for you, and you need that energy to give a talk or whatever it is that you're doing that's a high pressure thing. You need that mental energy. You need the energy to speak, to use your voice. You need the energy for your mind to focus on your contents, to focus on what you're talking about. So your mind is basically supplying you with a lot of energy, a lot of mental energy, and also focus or attention. It's energy for focusing on your contents, on what you're talking about. So good speakers are a little nervous, but good speakers use their nervous energy to talk, to use their voice. It takes energy to talk, it takes energy to think about what you're talking about. And if you haven't tried it yet, when you teach, after teaching a class, you'll find you're tired because you used a lot of energy. Especially if you're doing it in a second language, you use even more mental energy in a second language. So this is your brain's way of giving you extra energy. And so good speakers use this energy. And it may take a little practice, but in time you'll learn to use this energy. One of my favorite speakers on TED.com, actually, he's a famous educator. He's a very good speaker. He seems very, very natural. But one point I saw him rubbing his fingers. You can't really see it. It's just 1 second in the video. I saw him doing this. That's a signal of nervousness, nervous energy. He was very smooth in his presentation. He seems very comfortable. But you could see one little telltale sign. He was doing that at one point. So even he is nervous, but he uses his nervous energy. He channels that nervous energy into his speaking. And so he has a lot of energy. He's a very energetic speaker. And he's using his nervous energy to talk and to engage the audience and to have enthusiasm. If you're teaching, it helps to have enthusiasm so that the students will appreciate your lecture and they will feel satisfied. It helps to have enthusiasm when you're presenting your conference presentation, when you teach or whatever. And that takes energy. And your brain supplies it through nervousness. Okay, so I'm going to turn off. I'll just look at one speaker from TED.com. Let me play with the sound off. You can turn down the lights for a minute. Just look at his body language. No sound, just body language. What do you think of his body language? Okay, maybe at first he's a little nervous, but after a while he gets pretty cool. And generally he's pretty cool in his voice. Okay. Okay, and let me go on to another one. I don't know why this isn't zooming in. Okay, again, just watch his body language. This is the guy I was talking about earlier. I don't know if you'll see it right at this point, but watch his body language. He seems pretty natural, right? He's probably speaking to a group of about 500 or 1,000 people. Do you think you could do that? Okay, probably seen enough. So we can think about talk about vocal delivery, and then we'll come to body language. I talked about some of these before in previous talks. You need to use your diaphragm, these muscles down here. You may need to practice that. I suck in my stomach, I tense my stomach muscles. I need to lose weight, actually. I was a little sick lately and I ate too much food to overcome my cold, but so I've kind of grown a bit here. But I suck in my stomach muscles when I'm doing serious talking. You need energy, especially for the intonation of English and to project your voice. So you need to do it from down here. I've talked about this before. It's from these diaphragm muscles here, down here. You need to rehearse. You need energy. You need intonation, especially in English. I've talked about energy a little bit before. During my talk, I drink water. I don't drink coffee. Coffee or caffeine is not good for the vocal cords. It dries them out. Also, sugar before or during a talk. Fruit juices, sodas, I don't do. That's sugar. Sugar, carbohydrates, junk food, it goes into your bloodstream. You get this sort of energy boost for about 15 minutes, and then it comes down. The body has to remove that sugar from your blood after 15 minutes. A lot of sugar or carbohydrates in the blood is actually toxic. So your body releases insulin. It pulls it out and stores it as fat or as fatty acids in the blood. And so after 20 minutes, you feel tired again. So you don't want to depend on sugar, carbohydrates, even fruit juices. They have a lot of added sugar for your energy, unless it's a natural fruit juice. Water is best, room temperature water or slightly cool, not coffee or caffeine too close to my talk. For energy, teaching takes a lot of energy. When I started teaching full-time, I found, I'm really tired a lot. Well, I started exercising. Exercising is the best thing for your overall energy levels. Aerobic exercise, it makes you use your lungs. Bicycling, jogging, brisk walking, anything like rock climbing, whatever, swimming. That's best for your overall energy levels. It's much better than sugar for your overall energy levels. And you will need it if you become a full-time teacher or speaker. That's so much better. So that's your diaphragm muscles down there. You need to learn how to use that. We talked about that a little bit before. I suck in my stomach muscles. Even when I'm walking, I try to suck in my stomach muscles sometimes as exercise, as practice. And learn to breathe properly. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Things like that sometimes. Okay, move on. Okay, back to body language. So you had a moment to think about the body language. What did you notice about those two guys' body language? Maybe I'll give you 1 minute to talk about that. You saw two guys briefly. You saw their body language, no audio. What did you think of their body language? Was it good? What aspects of their body language were good? What made their speaking style appear good in their body language? So talk to each other for 1 minute. And what were some things that you noticed about their body language? How about up here at the front? Did you notice anything about their body language? They use their hands? Okay. Okay, so not really their legs. They use their legs for walking around. But did they walk around really erratically like this? No. Slow and smooth. Also, if you see Steve Jobs, now he moves a lot. But it's still, you don't have to move around as much as Steve Jobs. These guys move around a little bit. But even Steve Jobs, even though he walks around a lot, it's still pretty smooth. He's casually walking. But he covers the whole stage. He goes from all the way stage left, or stage right to stage left, in the middle. He uses the whole stage. These guys kind of walk around slowly and smoothly, and they use their hands a lot. Hand gestures. Okay, what else do you notice?
They use their hand gestures for emphasizing something.
Okay.
Pointing out some very important information. I think that helps the audience to understand what is important, what is not.
Okay. As you were talking, you use hand gestures too. Did you notice that?
Right.
Like that. Emphasizing things, you're doing like that. Or sometimes you point to, you might use your hands to emphasize by pointing to the slide or such, where you're kind of using hand gestures to emphasize things. So you use hand gestures to emphasize things, or sometimes to kind of express your flow, kind of flow gestures and emphasis. If you watch their hand gestures, how they time their hand gestures, it kind of conveys flow. It helps them to kind of, with their flow of thought, expressing their flow, sometimes emphasis, like that, or occasionally like that. Such. What else? Okay, facial expressions. So what did you notice about their facial expressions? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll admit I have a problem in that area because I tend to have tired eyes. My eyes get really dry, and so it's hard for me to control some of my gestures around here because my eyes are often tired. I'm on the computer all day. I don't take proper care of my eyes. Sometimes my eyes are sensitive. That probably doesn't look good when I'm squinting. You want your eyes open. That kind of suggests openness and friendliness. So probably sometimes my eyes are too closed because of just the eye soreness and eye discomfort, which isn't good. But good speakers have their eyes open. What about smiling? Can you fake a smile? Like, especially women are better at reading gestures and facial gestures than men. And men, you might think you can fake a smile, but some people, especially females, can really tell a real smile from a fake smile. A fake smile just involves your local muscles around here, like that. A real smile involves your cheek muscles pulling back, like that. And it's different from a fake smile. So a genuine smile involves more facial muscles, pulling your whole cheek muscles back. And it's different. So you can't really fake a smile very well. People can tell if it's a fake smile. So fake smiles don't work. Anything else? Let me show you some bad examples. McCain-Obama debate, at the beginning, they're both going out on stage. McCain realized he was going the wrong way, and he awkwardly reverses himself, and the camera just caught it at the right moment, and this is really embarrassing. And I don't know why the tongue went out. That was just really awkward. This is a famous photo on the internet. He kind of looks like Igor, Frankenstein's assistant or something. Famous examples like this on the internet. His facial muscles often just projected stupidity, or I have no idea what's going on. And I think that's true. Strangely though, when he was with other people though, in other ways his body language was very commanding. He used body language like directing people. When he was with Tony Blair, he kind of takes control with his body language of the situation. So even though he wasn't very bright, he was able to kind of take control of social situations through his body language. And you will see Tony Blair kind of imitating Bush's body language when they are together. The way he turns his head, or his facial gestures, or the way he uses his arms, and then Tony Blair, or even Putin, will just imitate him. So though he wasn't very bright, at least in social situations, he uses body language to take control of situations. That's kind of leading and mirroring. He took the lead, and the person with him was kind of mirroring him and imitating him. Here's another one. This is a very famous example. What was going on here? Do you remember this? This is when Bill Clinton was on TV and he was saying, "I did not have sex with Monica Lewinsky." He was lying. And liars, you can tell because sometimes people might, even in academia, be overconfident or lie about their results, or not too often, but it can happen. Or in a job interview. We often think of liars as looking away, avoiding eye contact. Sometimes true, but sometimes liars use excessive direct eye contact. They use excessive direct eye contact and overemphasis. Like he's pointing and he's using this angry look. And there are other things which maybe not one thing alone, but several things together can indicate a person is lying. His emphatic gestures, over direct eye contact. Speaking of direct eye contact, Westerners do use more direct eye contact than Asians. So when you're interacting with Westerners, don't be offended, especially if a person of the opposite gender is looking at you too much. It could be that they're flirting with you, but more often it could be just the cultural difference in eye contact. Westerners like direct eye contact, more direct eye contact, even to some degree between male and female. And if you avoid eye contact altogether, they might think, oh, you're being dishonest. And that could be a cultural misunderstanding from differences in eye contact. So that's something to think about. I've kind of learned to avoid really direct eye contact because I've been in an Asian context for a long time. My wife is Korean, we've been married for a while. While I was in grad school, I had a lot of Chinese and Korean friends, so even going back then, I had to adapt, and I've kind of not directly looking at people's eyes, especially females, but kind of looking around their face and such. So I've kind of gotten used to that. So it's kind of hard for me to go back to the American way. But Americans, even Europeans, will kind of look directly at your eyes. So don't feel too uncomfortable unless it's really obvious they're trying to flirt with you or something. So let me go back to other issues of body language. What are some other kinds of body language to avoid when you're talking? Well, let me see. Let's go part by part. Let's start with the head. Too much nodding. Okay, might not. Sometimes we nod if, like, I want you to agree with me. Like, don't you think I'm incredibly handsome? Okay, so I'm nodding, and I'm causing you, some of you, to nod in response. So that's kind of leading and mirroring. Like I talked about earlier, I'm leading. I'm making you respond. Like, aren't I? And some of you are going, yeah, you're agreeing. So sometimes I'm using nodding to elicit agreement from the audience. And sometimes good speakers do that. Now, sometimes good speakers could also be manipulative in that way if they do it too much. You don't want to tilt your head down or your chin down too much. I think if you saw those two guys, they were pretty good about their head angle, their chin angle. I have a long neck and my head sometimes goes to the side because my neck is too long, like a giraffe. Facial gestures. Is it good to smile a lot? Not too much. Why?
Doesn't look very serious.
Okay, you may not look very serious. You want to smile some, a little bit, in a way that's appropriate, but not too much. In a way that makes you look maybe not serious, or maybe submissive. Because actually if you look at chimpanzees, if a chimpanzee smiles at you, what does it mean when a chimpanzee smiles at you? It doesn't mean that he's laughing at your jokes. It doesn't mean necessarily that he's happy. For a chimpanzee, that's an expression of submission. I'm submitting to you. And we still have this some of it in our human psychology. Too much smiling can mean submissiveness, or I'm not really confident. Do you agree with me though? Like that. It's weak. It shows a lack of confidence or a lack of seriousness. So don't smile too much, especially ladies. Don't smile too much because it is a sexist environment out there in any country. There's a certain degree of sexism. So you do want to take control and show more confidence. Too much seriousness, of course, is also not good. If you're too serious, you want to find the right balance that's appropriate for the context and the audience. A lack of emotion, like Fox and Mulder and Scully on X-Files, they have like two facial expressions all the time. One is serious and one is very serious. And so they're not very cheerful people to be with. You want to seem somewhat friendly, but professional and fairly serious at heart. And other kinds of fake smiles, like tight-lipped smiles, and that's kind of seems dishonest and such. Dumb grins, like George W. Bush did all the time. Hands. People don't know what to do with their hands. If you're a new teacher, new speaker, a lot of people don't know what to do with their hands. What do you do with your hands? Well, you see, like what I'm doing, I'm using my hand gestures like this. You can make sure, if you don't know what to do, make sure you have something to hold. Microphone or your PowerPoint clicker in one hand, maybe your notes in another hand, and such. You can hold your notes like this. You don't want to hold your notes in front of you. Hold them down like this so you can see and then look at the audience again. Or if you use both hands, if I don't have a microphone, I can kind of grab them by the sides like this, and this kind of looks a little more cool if I'm just doing this. Otherwise, open hand gestures, I can have one hand free and I can use one hand for my gestures, and sometimes then engage the other hand if I want to really emphasize something. But open hands are better. It looks more honest and it looks more like I'm ready. It conveys more readiness or honesty or openness if my hand gestures are open like this rather than closed-fisted like that or something. And people will do things with their hands that can convey nervousness. Rubbing their fingers can convey nervousness. Playing with your hair, your glasses, nervousness. Rubbing your face. Now, maybe this might think, I'm thinking maybe that's true, but too much of that, or rubbing the side of your face, or Those kinds of things are more like nervous gestures. So watch out for that. What are some other nervous gestures? Again, maybe avoiding eye contact with your audience. Kind of want to look around your audience. I mean, kind of move my eye contact around. I don't have to look at everybody, but at least every part of the room, like this side, front and back, and front and back. So at least pick key parts, even in a big room. I don't need to look at everybody, but at least every part of the room I will look at and look around. Other things that convey nervousness. Again, your eye gestures, if your eyes are too closed, if your eyes are kind of darting back and forth, or looking down a lot, or such, looking at the clock too much. Okay. How about this? Closing my body. That means defensiveness, which in turn can mean nervousness or lack of confidence. I'm closing my body somehow with my limbs. And there are different ways that nervous speakers or speakers lacking confidence will do this. I could do like this, or even just grabbing an arm like this. I've seen this, actually, during a talk. Or I could close my body with my legs, like this, twisted legs. That's also nervousness. Other things that suggest the same thing, if I'm leaning on an object too much. It's like I'm holding on, I'm depending on something for support. Too much of this can suggest nervousness or a lack of confidence. Okay, like this. Or if I'm standing in one place all the time. It helps to move around slowly. At least you may have to be close to your computer. That's okay, you still have a couple of meters of space to move around and walk around. What are some other things that maybe you want to avoid? Let's see, eye contact, we talked about this. Yeah, scratching yourself like this. Oh, I need some skin lotion here. Your palms are open. Oh yes. How about this? Is this good?
Very bad.
Pardon?
I think it's bad.
It's bad? Why?
Sometimes in my setting, it means unconcerned and disrespectful.
Okay. So it might be, now, Westerners, especially Americans, might do this a little bit, but too much is not good. And especially in Korean culture, this is kind of rude in Korean culture. It means I'm being arrogant and such. You'll also see, especially Americans, do like this a little bit. In Korean culture, I think that's not good either, especially if your audience is either your peers or superiors. In American culture, a little bit of this might be okay because it looks kind of cool. I'm relaxed, yeah, I'm cool. But again, too much means I'm lazy. Or in Korean culture, again, I think it's also disrespectful or impolite in Korean culture. Things like that you want to watch out for. Okay. I think there are a number of other gestures I could go through. Leg gestures. Your legs should be kind of fairly reasonable distance and such. And the more I could talk about in job interviews, if you do a job interview, the job interview dynamic is kind of like I'm directly in front of you. And they do that deliberately because it's intimidating. They want to see how you are under pressure. Like I'm directly facing you. How do you feel? It's a little nervous. And they do that deliberately. You still want to maintain open gestures. Have your arms and hands open. You know, don't close up. Don't fold your arms. Don't close your legs. Ladies don't, well, in professional situations anyway, but especially in interview, don't wear short skirts. One, it doesn't look professional anyway. Especially skinny women in short skirts. They look like chickens walking around. But during a situation like an interview, if you have to sit down, you have to cross your legs really tight, that's a defensive gesture. It makes you look closed off. So don't wear short skirts. And if a guy hires you because you're wearing a short skirt, probably not a kind of guy you want to work for anyway. Because I know I've heard of some Korean guys who like to hire women because they wear short skirts, or they like to give good grades to their students who wear short skirts. That's a sexist. You don't want to deal with that kind of guy. So dress conservatively. so that you don't have to use these defensive gestures like crossing your legs, and keep your body language open and confident. Flow gestures, emphasis gestures like that during the job interview as well. And if you want more, if you feel like you don't have a good command of gestures, there are popular books on body language that are helpful in the bookstores. Most of what they say is probably valid. Most, not all, but most of it can be helpful if you are especially going to be doing a lot of speaking or interacting with the public or with people. So it's probably a good thing if you want to brush up on your body language. And there's some final things on I have a handout on body language, some other things that are culturally may not be okay. Things like the thumbs up sign, okay sign. In some cultures they're bad, they have bad meaning, so watch out. That's in a handout on the website, an extra handout on body language and such. Anyway, I'm kind of over time today, so I need to wrap up. If you have questions, you can talk to me afterwards. Next week we start talking about academic writing, 10 a.m. and then 2 p.m. both times the next 2 Fridays. Okay, thank you and good luck.